With the release of Poppy Playtime Chapter 4, I think it's time to rank all the monsters that we fought against thus far from most dangerous to least dangerous. And we'll be judging them based on their intelligence, their physical strength, and how hard their actual fight was in their respective chapters. Now, starting out with the highest tier, which we're going to call Savage, I think we need to put the prototype here. Even though we didn't get a direct confrontation with him at any of the chapters yet, we know for sure that he's very powerful and also intelligent. His strength is clear by the way that he was able to pierce through Catnap's head with almost no problem, and we can assume that he's collecting these bodies to add them to himself, which will probably make him even more powerful over time. We also know that he's very smart simply by the fact that he's almost escaped the facility and is even able to manipulate some of the other monsters into doing his bidding. One example of that obviously is Catnap, who basically viewed him as a god. Plus, in the latest chapter, we learn that the prototype has been Ollie all along and has been manipulating Poppy and making her move in the way that he wants her to.
Ollie, something's gone horribly wrong. The safe haven—
Shelf ventilation block B6. Is this where you are, Poppy?
What?
Stay where you are.
And listen closely. You're not going to run. You're not going to fight.
All in all, I think no one can argue that when we finally do get to fight this character, he will likely be our biggest challenge yet. Next in this top tier, we're going to have Toei the Doughman, and while his character design doesn't look super threatening, let's not forget what he did to Pianosaurus. He tossed that guy around like he was a tiny toy and not a bigger body monster. But as we learned in chapter 4, Toei is about 900 pounds of clay basically. So in a 1v1 fight, there isn't many other monsters that I think could actually put him down aside from maybe the prototype. And while his physical strength makes him very dangerous, the fact that he is also very intelligent and able to use his body in unique ways also makes him a daunting foe. He can possibly get through any area as long as there's like a crack, bars, or even just like a small hole. So running away from this guy would be impossible pretty much. And finally, his fight scene shows us that if you don't have access to extreme cold, it will be very difficult to put this guy down for good. And even if you can freeze him, you'll then need to like do an extreme amount of damage to actually hurt him. For as goofy as this character may look, I think that he is one of the more powerful tunes to be added into Poppy Playtimes thus far. Next in the top tier, I'm going to go ahead and add Catnap, and while I think that they dropped the ball a little bit on his character, meaning that he should have probably popped up way more in chapter 3, I'd be lying if I said he isn't super dangerous. And this really should be clear just by the fact that he's a giant cat that likes to stalk and play with his prey. But if that isn't enough, he's also very fast and strong while also having those claws that are sharp enough to cut through like wood, stone, and metal. He can also emit the red smoke, which can make his victims pass out and also make them have terrible nightmares, which is where we actually see the character named Nightmare Huggy, who I'm going to speak about later in this video. And in the final battle with Catnap, we also see that he can make a person hallucinate while they're still conscious. And while I wouldn't place his intelligence among the highest, the fact that he is easily manipulated by the prototype and turns into a zealot is almost worse than being smart. I think of Catnap the same way I think of some soldiers. It's almost like he was trained to not think, but rather just to follow orders and execute the task at hand, no matter the cost. Now, moving down to the vicious tier, we have Mommy Longlegs to start us off. And I understand that some people may want to see her put in that top tier, but I don't agree with that. While Mommy is very strong to the point where she can like one-shot you if she catches you, and on that note, she's also surprisingly fast with the ability to stretch out her limbs hundreds of feet. But her major flaw, and why I'm not going to put her in that top tier, is her mental state. She simply doesn't have the mind to be a top tier threat. And this becomes clear when we remember how she dies in the game. She gets so upset and hell-bent on catching us that she ends up running into and getting stuck inside this grinder, and then is pulled away by the prototype. And if Mommy had a cooler head, I think she would be a real threat because she definitely has the power and the abilities to trap her victims. Because I think a lot of people forget that she has the ability to create webs, and they basically work the same as a spider's web, meaning that she can just trap you in there and then get you at her leisure. We see her use this ability to gag Poppy and also to take out Bunzo later. And just as a side note, while we don't get to see this character in the base Poppy Playtime game, I would also put like Daddy Longlegs in this tier as well, because I assume that he has the same abilities as Mommy. Next in the vicious tier is going to be Huggy Wuggy, and I think since we haven't really seen him since chapter 1, people have forgotten just how dangerous he is. But this dude stands at 18 feet tall and has the strength to match his size, and is also surprisingly fast, as we kind of witness in that chase scene through the vents. And another thing that we learned by watching him run through those vents is that he can fit in very tight spaces. While obviously not on Doei's level, it still is pretty good considering that he's 18 feet tall. I also want to point out that in log 08502, it was said that Huggy was the perfect test subject because he has the perfect amount of intelligence and obedience. And while we don't know as much about Kissy Missy, I assume that they have similar capabilities as Huggy Wuggy, the primary difference between the two being their mindset. Huggy seems to be more prone to violence, while Kissy is more prone to actually help people. The last character I'm going to put in the vicious tier is going to be Yarnaby, and I struggle with this one because he was very underutilized in chapter 4, but he is actually very strong.
Please, do keep making this enjoyable for me.
Just like Catnap, he has those metal claws that can cut through most objects, and is described as being fast and agile and having the body of a lion. Although when running away from him in the game, he moves more like a overweight dog. So even though in the game his fight was very lackluster, I still think I want to rank him pretty high because we know that he is dangerous. They just didn't utilize him very well. Now moving over to the scary tier, I think we should actually start off with Miss Delight. And I know some people may have expected her to be higher on the list because her chase sequence was actually kind of difficult for some people, but she isn't really much stronger than the average human, and her intelligence has taken a hit because she's basically lost her mind at this point. For those of you that don't remember, apparently there used to be 8 other identical dolls that acted as teachers for the children in play care. But after the toy rebellion, Catnap trapped the dolls in a room, and Miss Delight ended up eating all of her sisters in order to survive, which of course caused her to lose her mind. So while she is very spooky in a way, she doesn't have the strength or the intelligence to be placed much higher on the list than mid tier. Next in this tier is going to be the mini critters, and these are the little guys that are able to enter any hole or wound that a toy has and then take over their body, regardless of if the toy is alive or dead. And while these guys are not very strong or smart, I think that ability can actually make them dangerous in the right situation. In chapter 3, we see them take over Dog Days, which isn't that bad since he's missing both his legs, but if they had found a toy that was like more intact or healthier, it could have been a real problem for us. So I think a mid-tier threat is probably about right for these guys. Next, I'm going to add Pianosaurus here, and I'm a little disappointed with the fact that we didn't get to see much from him in chapter 4. But one thing that is clear to me is that I can't put him much higher than this because Doei was able to low diff him, so it's clear that Pianosaurus isn't that powerful when you compare him to some of the other monsters. But just looking at his design, we can assume that he's more powerful than your typical human and will probably be a threat for the average person. So I think this mid tier is probably going to be good for him. Now moving over to the bottom tier, let's start with Poppy. While Poppy seems to be very smart, she's not very strong at all, and she's very tiny, and she seems to be dependent on other people to have any kind of success. And as of now, she hasn't really shown any abilities that would make her a huge threat to us, and a lot of her comrades are either dead or have betrayed her at this point. So I think this bottom tier is probably going to be a good place. Next, I'm going to go ahead and add Nightmare Huggy, and while this guy has the scariest looking character design so far, the fact that he's just an hallucination is why he's ranked so low. At the end of the day, he can't really do anything to you, and his chase scene is pretty lackluster when you consider that you just run into a dead end, which really pales in comparison to the original chase scene with Huggy Wuggy. Next, I'm going to add Dog Days here, and maybe this guy would have been more of a threat if he actually had his legs, but at this point, I think I just kind of felt bad for him as he's chasing you, because as long as you know the route, he's not really going to get you. Bunzo Bunny is next, and this guy for me is just way too cute to be too high on the list, but also, as long as your memory's good, you don't really have to worry about him actually getting you in any way. Maybe if they made it to where he was like a cheater in chapter 2 and was like bending the rules, maybe I would put him higher on the list, but as of now, he plays the game fair and he actually gets bodied at the end for it. With that being said, the mini version of Huggy Wuggy kind of falls into the same category as well. As long as you can beat their game, they aren't really a threat to you, and the game itself is actually pretty easy. I would probably rank these guys a little bit higher if they were like chasing you around the facility, because there are a lot of them, and I guess they are kind of a decent size, even though they're way smaller than Huggy Wuggy and don't have his strength. But as of now, I don't think I can rank them much higher than this. Next, we're gonna go ahead and throw the nightmare critters here. And while there are a lot of these guys, they're fairly easy to like get away from or just avoid flat out. And as long as you have that little fire finger thing, they can't really do anything to you. So I thought these guys were very lackluster, and they definitely deserve to be on the bottom here. And the last character that I'm going to mention here is going to be the Doctor. And this guy is interesting because he seems to be able to see everything that's going on in the facility, and he has a lot of control over what's going on as well. Not to mention, he also has these exoskeletons that he can move around to monitor people or to even like attack people, what it seems like. And on top of that, he's also very intelligent and seems to have a close relationship with the prototype. Put down in the comments where you think we should rank this guy. Is he savage? Is he vicious? Is he scary? Or is he just at the bottom tier? With that being said, if you enjoyed this video, check out this video on the screen here. Subscribe today to become a member of the Orcs Force, and we'll see you tomorrow with another one. Peace.